Florida State takes on Louisville in a top 10 matchup at Papa John Stadium. Welcome to your Florida State Seminoles Nole Insiders game preview. I'm Lane Hurt along with Tim Lenefelt. Obviously, Louisville, a great team. Let's get to some of the numbers. Obviously, an ACC opponent, 2-0 on the season. The Cardinals are ranked number 1 in total offense, averaging 754 yards a game. That are, of course, led by Lamar Jackson. Second in total offense, 507.5 yards a game and 13 touchdowns. 38th in total defense. Now, Tim, obviously we knew before the season this would be a challenging game heading up to Louisville for the first road game of the season. Is this one of the Seminoles' most dangerous opponents?
It is, but you know what? In a way, I almost think that Louisville did Florida State a favor, but by blowing out Charlotte the way that they did, by blowing out Syracuse the way they did on a Friday night game when they were the only college game in town, Louisville kind of served notice to the country that, hey, we're a team to be reckoned with this year. So any chance of Louisville potentially sneaking up on Florida State mixed in between, the Ole Miss game to start the season and then some more difficult games down the road, well, that's out the window now. Louisville ranks in the top 10. It's Florida State's first true road game, ACC opener. Lamar Jackson, you mentioned, is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Probably, if they were to award it today, would win the Heisman Trophy. So you can bet that Louisville has Florida State's full attention. And so at least in a way, I think that's a good thing.
Also, first road game.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the neutral site game. I mean, it was pretty much a home game.
It was a lot like it.
It's going to be interesting to see how the players, especially a young quarterback like DeAndre Francois, handles the hostile environment.
Absolutely, and you remember you were there 2 years ago. We both were at Louisville in 2014 for a Thursday night game, and the atmosphere there really rivaled just about anything that I've seen in the ACC this side of Florida State or Clemson, and it was really, really close. That crowd was fired up, ready to go, and you saw the team respond. Louisville did that night by taking a 3-touchdown lead before Florida State rallied and won. This is going to be a tough test, especially you mentioned for DeAndre Francois. He's been a pretty cool customer up to this point, has come back from some challenging situations, but he hasn't faced a hostile crowd quite like the one he's going to have on Saturday. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how he does with it and how the rest of the offense responds and rallies around him.
To our stat of the week, thank you to the guys at Pro Football Focus once again. And you can't talk this game without talking about Lamar Jackson. He's the biggest factor, I think, in this game. And he's had some incredible numbers so far this season. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks, they get their yards done by the dink and dunk. He's been tremendous throwing the deep ball. If you look at his numbers on passes 10 yards or more, 18 of 30, that's 60%, 16.7 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, almost identical numbers to his throws under 10 yards. And this is a guy who can beat you a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and it's going to be a test for Florida State secondary, especially without, we haven't mentioned yet, Derwin James, the safety, who will miss the game with a knee injury while recovering from knee surgery. I think Florida State, if you want to take, another silver lining, is that they do have experience with a mobile quarterback in Chad Kelly, a guy who will uncork the deep ball in Chad Kelly. But Chad Kelly at Ole Miss is not nearly as fast as Lamar Jackson. And so I think what you have to worry about is if you can't contain Lamar Jackson in the pocket and let him get out and start getting his legs going, now you have to worry about, either him taking off and scrambling down the field if you don't have anybody watching him, or B, buying that time with those legs and scanning downfield for a receiver who has either slipped his man in coverage or a DB who just, you can't expect those guys to cover more than a few seconds at a time. The longer he has, the more chance he has to make those plays and find an open receiver down the field, whether it be a broken play or one that just takes a while to develop. You got to get him on the ground quickly because the longer he's upright, the more chance he has to hurt you.
And boy, Tim, you really kind of led into what our matchup of the week is, so thank you for the segue help on that.
What a coincidence.
We have Lamar Jackson versus Matthew Thomas. Last year, I think Jacob Pugh kind of took the spot of kind of spying on Lamar Jackson. He only had 32 yards rushing against the Seminoles, so they did a good job of containing him in the pocket. But this year, I think you look at Matthew Thomas as that guy who's going to have that responsibility.
Especially with Derwin James out, I think a lot of Florida State fans coming into this game were expecting Derwin to sort of be the neutralizer against Lamar Jackson, a guy who could athletically match up with Lamar and keep him in check. And look, Matthew Thomas is a big guy. He's bigger than Derwin James. He's a lot bigger than Lamar Jackson, but he's about as fast and physical as a linebacker as I can remember playing here at Florida State and at the college level. He's just unbelievable. I made note of the play. I think it was about the 5th play of the Ole Miss game when Ole Miss hit a long pass down the middle of the field. It was going for about a 35-yard gain, which is, again, is not good for Florida State. But what I took from that is that an SEC receiver in the open field running straight towards the end zone, and he gets run down and caught from behind by a linebacker, by Matthew Thomas. There's not very many guys that can do that. Go back and watch the play if you can. It really is remarkable. So to see the kind of speed that he has, again, I'm not saying that he's going to run stride for stride with Lamar Jackson, but he can at least give him something to think about. And I really am curious to see how Matthew Thomas pairs or matches up with Lamar Jackson, because I think he can sort of fill that neutralizer role.
And we can talk X's and O's all day. I think one thing we can agree on is this is a really fun game. Game day is going to be there. Great for the ACC to have someone other than Florida State and Clemson in a huge game. This is a lot of fun.
It really is. And look, Louisville is a great trip. Hopefully some Florida State fans are going to make their way up there. I'm sure some of you are. If you haven't been, it's a lot of fun, lots of stuff to do there. And again, I think it's a really good atmosphere in Louisville. And they've certainly been, Jimbo Fisher talked about it in his press conference on Monday, a welcome addition to the ACC from a football perspective and a basketball perspective too, really kind of raising the profile of the league. And you see it, game days in Louisville for the first time ever, and then going directly into the noon broadcast, national TV, which I think is pretty cool. I know we've kind of gotten away from noon games being high-profile games, but I like it.
Used to be the biggest game in Florida State-Miami. Used to be at noon every
exactly,
weekend.
Yeah, and the Florida games were too. So now what you're seeing is, I don't know exactly what time college game day starts, but from 9 a.m. or so to about 3 or 3:30, you're going to have just basically a showcase for the Atlantic Coast Conference in Florida State and Louisville, and that's a good thing for everybody.
There you have it, Seminole fans. Florida State versus Louisville, number 2 versus number 10, high noon at Papa John Stadium on ABC. The Nole Insiders will be there. We'll have your analysis and video highlights, post-game reaction, and of course, don't miss out on Saturday morning. We'll have your 3 keys to a Seminole victory as well. So for Tim Linnefelt, I'm Lane Hurt. Go Noles.